I'm 50 years old and have shared my life with the same man for over 2 decades. Until recently, I thought I had everything settled. My role, my routines, my quiet contentment. I was never one to seek out thrills or create drama. I preferred my days calm and predictable. But sometimes life has a way of nudging you when you least expect it, a soft whisper that says, "There's more." I genuinely believed this kind of disruption was for others, not me. Don't make the mistake I did. It all began on a brisk Thursday morning. I just finished tidying up after the annual charity breakfast at my husband's firm. He'd mentioned they were short-staffed, and I'd always enjoyed pitching in. The office hummed with a subdued energy, a mix of accomplishment and the quiet aftermath of an event. There were leftover pastries, stacks of brochures, and people murmuring farewells. I didn't know many of them personally, but I offered a polite smile to everyone. It felt like the right thing to do. My husband, William, was engrossed in conversation with a major donor, and I decided it was a good time to slip away and wait in the car. That's when a voice spoke from behind me. "Heading out, Mrs. Davies." I turned to see Liam, one of William's newer colleagues. I'd seen him briefly at the firm's summer picnic. Tall, with light brown hair that always seemed to fall perfectly, despite looking slightly windswept. He seemed to be in his early 30s. He was always courteous, quick with a light-hearted comment, but never overbearing. The kind of person who could be overlooked until you found your gaze lingering on them a moment too long. "Oh no," I replied. "Just making my way to the parking lot. I don't mind waiting." He checked his watch, then glanced towards the window. "Looks like traffic's building up. I'm parked close by if you need a lift." "No trouble at all." I hesitated. My feet ached, and the sky had started to darken, taking on the bruised hue of a coming storm. I gave a small nod. His car was neat, with a faint scent of fresh coffee and a hint of something earthy like wood. He immediately lowered the volume on the radio when I got in, and we settled into that awkward quiet of two acquaintances unsure how to proceed. "You were a great help inside," he said after a moment. Everyone seemed impressed. "Just tried to be useful," I responded, my eyes fixed on the wipers, which had just begun their steady sweep as the first drops of rain fell. Liam gave a gentle smile. "That's what people like you do, isn't it? Always contributing, often behind the scenes." I wasn't sure how to interpret "people like you." He seemed to catch my slight discomfort. "I didn't mean it negatively, honestly. I don't think most people truly appreciate how much women like you are the backbone of everything." A strange tightness formed in my chest. No one had articulated something like that to me in years, perhaps ever. I studied his profile, trying to gauge his sincerity, but he kept his gaze steady on the road, calm and composed. "It's funny," I said, a soft chuckle escaping me. "Sometimes I feel like I've become almost invisible since turning 40. Liam briefly met my eyes, then returned his focus to the road. "You're far from invisible, Eleanor." The way he spoke my name, it wasn't just a sound. It was as if he'd pulled me back into focus, reminding me of something I'd forgotten about myself. We fell into silence again, the drumming of the rain on the roof growing louder. I expected him to drop me at the main gate, but he turned into the familiar side road leading directly to our house. "You know where I live?" I asked, a hint of surprise in my voice. "I've dropped William off a few times after company events, remember? You weren't home on those occasions." "Oh right," I murmured, though no specific memory surfaced. I wasn't quite sure what emotions I should be feeling. He pulled into the driveway and shifted the car into park, but the engine remained running. The rain now fell in a relentless curtain, blurring the world outside. "Thanks for the ride," I said, reaching for the door handle. But before my fingers touched it, he spoke. "Eleanor, can I ask you something? And please tell me to stop if it's out of line." I paused, my hand frozen on the handle. Something in his tone, a quiet earnestness, made me turn back. "All right," I said cautiously. He looked at me, not with an intrusive gaze, but with an intensity that made me feel truly seen. As a person, as a woman. "Are you truly content?" he asked simply. I blinked. A peculiar warmth spread through me, quickly followed by a cold wave of guilt. "That's a complex question." He nodded, his eyes still fixed on mine. "I suppose it usually is." I didn't know how to respond. No one had ever asked me such a direct, vulnerable question. They assumed, they conjectured, but no one had genuinely inquired. I looked at him and perceived something I wasn't prepared for. Genuine curiosity, a gentle understanding, perhaps even a flicker of longing. Not lust, not fleeting interest, but a nascent connection. I felt my throat tighten. "I really should go now." Liam gave a slow nod. "Of course." But he didn't start the car. He simply remained there as I opened the door and stepped out into the pouring rain. I didn't rush for cover. I let the water soak through my clothes, chilling my skin. It felt both raw and oddly cleansing. William was still at the firm's event. He wouldn't be home for another hour. And Liam? He was still sitting in his car when I glanced back, just before I stepped inside. That evening, as I stood in the kitchen, towel drying my hair, a strange realization dawned on me. I felt alive. I didn't sleep well that night. I lay beside William, listening to the familiar rhythm of his breathing, the soft, barely audible rasp of his snore. It was a sound I had grown accustomed to over decades, like the steady ticking of an old clock. Comforting, predictable. But that night it sounded different. It felt distant, a quiet echo of how far apart we had drifted, unnoticed over time. Liam's question resonated in my mind. "Are you truly content?" No one had asked me that since my 20s, perhaps. Back then, the answer was simple. Life was vibrant, full of motion and hope. Raising children, building a home, sharing laughter in the kitchen over burnt meals and budget worries. But somewhere along the way, we had both fallen silent in the same room. The next morning, I followed my usual routine. Brewed coffee, started the laundry, watered the plants by the kitchen window. William kissed my cheek on his way out, muttering something about early meetings and traffic. I offered my automatic, well-practiced smile. Then the door clicked shut, and I simply stood there, still clutching the dish towel. My phone buzzed with a new notification. "Liam. Hey, I truly hope I didn't overstep yesterday." I stared at the message for a long moment, my thumbs hovering over the screen. "We know you didn't. Just surprised me," he replied almost immediately. "Liam, fair enough. It wasn't really a fair question to ask, I know. But I've been thinking about you since the event. The way you carried yourself, and how your eyes seemed to hold so much. I don't know why I noticed, but I did." I didn't respond right away. I walked around the living room, picked up a stray book from the floor, adjusted a curtain that was already perfectly aligned. My heart was beating a little faster than it should have been. Finally I typed, "You're not wrong. I think I've felt invisible for a very long time." He didn't reply for a while. I imagined him reading it slowly, perhaps pondering how to respond. When he did, it wasn't what I had expected. "Liam, would you consider getting a tea sometime? Just to talk, nothing more." I sat down at the kitchen table, the very same table where countless family meals had been shared, where birthday candles had been blown out, where bills were paid and quiet arguments sometimes whispered. And now here I was, staring at a message from a man significantly younger than me, asking to simply talk. I didn't say yes immediately, but I didn't say no either. That Friday, I told William the first was heading out for some errands. I chose something from the back of my wardrobe that hadn't seen daylight in years. A soft cream blouse that gently highlighted parts of me I used to appreciate. I took extra care with my makeup, though I told myself it was merely out of habit. We met at a quaint little cafe tucked away on a side street I'd almost forgotten existed, the kind with worn wooden floors, soft jazz music, and charming handwritten menus. Liam stood as I walked in. He looked fresh, his shirt sleeves neatly rolled, a quiet smile on his face. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said softly. "Neither was I replied, and it was the honest truth. We settled into a quiet corner, talking about mundane things at first. Books, the weather, city traffic. But then, without warning, the conversation deepened, like stepping from a shallow wading pool into the vast open sea. He spoke of his parents' difficult separation, how he witnessed his mother recede into the role of an ex-wife and never quite find herself again, and how that taught him to notice when women grow quiet in their own homes. I spoke of my children, how much I missed their younger years, how I sometimes envied their newfound freedoms, and how, despite loving William, I sometimes felt I no longer truly knew him. Our teas grew cold, yet we remained. At one point I reached for my cup, and our fingers froze. So did he. That delicate, undeniable spark flared between us. I pulled my hand back. "I'm not seeking anything reckless," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded. "Neither am I." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe we could keep whatever this was, safe and contained. But something had irrevocably shifted. The air between us was no longer innocent. When we finally stood to leave, he gently touched my elbow. "Thank you for saying yes," he said. I drove home with the car windows slightly down, letting the cool wind tangle my hair. As I pulled into the driveway, I caught myself smiling. Not because of what had transpired, but because of what might be. The days that followed were outwardly calm but tumultuous inside my mind. William didn't seem to notice anything different, or if he did, he said nothing. We still had dinner at 7, still watched our shows in the evening, but my thoughts kept returning to that cafe table, to the quiet moments between Liam and me that had conveyed more than words ever could. We hadn't made plans to see each other again, but I felt his presence everywhere. In the gentle breeze on my morning walks, in the unfamiliar ache I now realized I'd been carrying for years. I began noticing small things about William. The way he ate his food, his eyes fixed on the TV, the way he never asked about my day, and the way I'd stopped expecting him to. It wasn't anger I felt. It was a profound sense of distance. A quiet, polite separation, built over time, layer upon layer of unspoken truths. 3 days later, I unexpectedly ran into Liam at the grocery store. I was in the produce aisle, examining a tomato for ripeness, when I heard his voice behind me. "Still the best eyes in the room, I see." I turned too quickly, my heart pounding as if I'd been caught doing something illicit. But he wasn't smirking or teasing. He was just watching me gently, patiently. "Liam," I breathed. "You startled me." "Didn't mean to," he said, looking down at the basket in his hand. "Wasn't sure I'd see you again." I hesitated. I wasn't sure either. A silence stretched between us, the hum of the store, the rolling carts, the soft background music, all faded into the background. He cleared his throat. "I think about you." I felt the words settle like a heavy weight on my chest. "I know this isn't sustainable," I said. "This thing between us, it can't go where it wants to go." "I know," he said quietly. "But that doesn't mean it wasn't real." We stood there for a long moment, neither of us knowing what to do next. Then finally I nodded. "Walk me to my car." Outside, the air smelled of impending rain once more. We didn't speak as we walked, simply moved together in step as if we always had. At my car I stopped and turned to him. "I can't be someone who lies, Liam. Not to him, and not to myself." "I don't want you to be," he said, his voice soft. "But I needed you to know. You woke something in me, something I didn't know I could feel again." The tears came then, soft, almost apologetic. "You did the same for me," I whispered. He stepped forward, and for the very first time we embraced. There was no urgency, no heat, just a deep, quiet closeness. His arms around me, my cheek against his shoulder. The bittersweet ache of letting go. Then he pulled back. "Goodbye, Eleanor. Goodbye." And just like that, he was walking away. I sat in the car for a while before starting the engine, watching the taillights of his car fade out of the parking lot. I didn't cry again. I just sat with the raw truth. When I got home, I found William in the backyard, tinkering with the grill. The familiar scent of charcoal and lighter fluid hung in the evening air. "Hey," he said, wiping his hands. "I was thinking we could have burgers tonight, like old times." He nodded. "That sounds nice." He looked at me a little longer than usual. "You okay?" And for the first time in a long while I told him the truth. "I'm not sure," I said. "But I want to be." We stood there quietly as the sky turned a deep orange above us. It wasn't closure, not truly. It wasn't an ending or a beginning. It was a moment. And sometimes moments are all we get. But they're enough to wake us up, to remind us we are still here, still capable of feeling, of choosing, of changing even after all this.